Morning, welcome to End of Week News with Ainslie. Today we are talking property. Australia's property time bomb at the cliff. It's Friday, and whilst not the 13th, we are now at an even scarier 13 weeks from Australia's so-called economic cliff, when a host of emergency measures put in place by the government will come to an end. Yesterday's employment figures for May, the worst since 2001, were a stark reminder we are far from out of the woods, just 13 weeks before the safety net is removed. Here's a reminder of what goes. The JobKeeper wage subsidy covers 3.5 million workers, paying employers $70 billion to keep them on the books. The coronavirus supplement of $550 a fortnight goes to a range of welfare recipients, including 1.6 million unemployed workers on JobSeeker. Wage subsidies for apprentices, small to medium enterprise loan guarantee, where the government backs 50% of the new loans issued by lenders. Subsidies for domestic air travel. A ban on rental evictions if a person has lost income due to COVID-19. Mortgage pausing for owner-occupiers and landlords, essentially stopping repayments. This list is extensive, but not as extensive as the number of Australians relying on it and its role in propping up accommodation, property, small business and medium business, and by default the broader Australian economy everyone relies on humming. Partner at Deloitte Access Economics, Nick Hutley, describes it accordingly. It's a bit like trying to whip out the tablecloth from under your set of china. It's not going to come away smoothly, and there's going to be crashes and broken plates everywhere. You've no doubt read the news of headline figures, much worse than expected, more than double, of 227,000 jobs lost, and an unemployment figure jumping to 7.1%. However, most mainstream is not talking about the derivation of unemployment figures and the hidden effect of participation in the denominator. The participation rate again dropped to just 62.9%, its lowest since 2001. To count in that measure, you need to be actively looking and available for work. If we kept the participation rate at the same average to 2019, the unemployment rate would be a staggering 11.4%. Check out this next chart, participation adjusted unemployment rate. But if we look at this again in the context of our property market, where mortgages need to be serviced, it's not just about being employed. It is about being employed enough to meet those repayments when the holidays end in September. That is when it is relevant to look at a couple more numbers. Firstly, the underutilization rate combines unemployed and underemployed persons, the latter with insufficient hours to make ends meet. That official figure stands at 20.2% before any participation rate adjustment. That is, 1 in 5 are not earning enough now. Secondly, the 7.1% or 11.4% above and discussed is still counting the 3.5 million Australians on JobKeeper, as mentioned. With 12,154,100 officially employed people, that represents nearly 29%. The September cliff deals the double blow of JobKeeper halving and the support of many of their employers to stay afloat as well. The old adage that property prices only fall if people have to sell through financial hardship, such as the loss of employment or rental income, then comes to the fore. And this from The Guardian yesterday. Chris Martin, a housing expert at the University of New South Wales, said it was likely many tenants would be required to start paying back rent arrears that they had accumulated when they reached the end of the COVID agreements they had brokered with their landlords. Martin acknowledges the housing market was changing, with falling rents and an increase in vacancies in many places, but also noted welfare payments such as JobSeeker would be cut in half by September. This could be a disaster for people individually and for the sector, he said. There's a bit of time bomb coming. The other big pressure on rental demand and therefore income is the collapse in immigration. Both BIS Oxford Managing Director Robert Mellor and ANZ Head of Economics David Plank were warning of the impact in the AFR yesterday. Whether it's zero or close to zero, the number has plummeted, Mr. Mellor said. So we are forecasting a drop in migration of about 60,000 this financial year and another 150,000 in the next financial year. With about 2.7 people per household, the forecast drop equates to about 80,000 fewer houses needing to be built. These people who are no longer coming impact on the rental market, so it will significantly reduce demand and that will lift vacancy rates and increase risks around residential property, Mr. Mellor said. ANZ Head of Economics David Plank said lower population growth due to border closures reduced the demand for housing, while increased supply from conversions of holiday rentals to long-term rentals might increase supply. Together, these effects of the pandemic and lockdowns have already put downward pressure on capital city rents and are expected to reduce the return on investor housing, Mr. Plank said. That is from a rental income perspective for investors, but there's also the mortgage stress looming for the ending of the mortgage repayment holiday. Earlier this week, the Australian Banking Association, or ABA, released data on loan deferrals to 12th of June. This revealed a staggering $234.1 billion across 772,600 loans that have been deferred, including 480,700 mortgages, totaling $173.5 billion, or around 1 in 14 mortgages having deferred repayments. Last week, ABC economist Alan Kohler spelt out the crisis before us. If the deferred loans were treated as impaired this year rather than deferred, and the Big Four's share of them was the same as their 80% share of total loans and advances, probably a safe assumption. Impaired loan exposure would be 16.6% of their loans, and advances would be more or less wiping out their capital. After 6 months, the support program runs out in September, at which point it is assumed $224 billion in loans, plus whatever is deferred between now and then, would instantly become 90 to 100 days in arrears. September is rushing towards the banks. How many of the 744,904 people and businesses and counting will be able to resume repayments? How long can loan deferrals go for? What proportion of loans must be classified as impaired at September 30? What provisions must be struck for future impairments? How much capital would need to be raised to cover these sums? If it is a 12-figure amount, that is, if it's more than $100 billion, who's going to supply this money? But if the government's various income support packages end in September and October, as planned, the bank support will have to begin, or else the pandemic crisis will turn into a financial crisis like no other. And so clearly we have both these determinants for falling house prices well in play, both rental income and repayment stress. Or even more concern is that we are already seeing falls, and substantial ones, occurring with the latest from CoreLogic's 5-city daily dwelling price index, showing a 0.21% drop in the week ending 18th of June. If you're thinking that sounds small, annualizing it turns into an 11% drop. And this is all happening before this cliff in September. And just check out this last chart here, CoreLogic weekly price movements, just to give you an indication of how that's looking. A little bit scary. That's news for this week from Ainslie. You can always duck over to our website, as always, ainsliebullion.com.au, to read or listen to our other news articles. You can also purchase gold, silver, and cryptocurrency products from Ainslie and ainsliwealth.com.au. We'll catch you next week.